When most people think about their biggest gardening problems, they're usually worried about, say, hungry deer, or maybe an unexpected summer drought. But for a surprising handful of plants, the law itself is actually your biggest obstacle. It's true. You might be completely shocked to learn that just growing certain fruits in the United States can land you with a federal fine, a state citation, or even a knock on the door from an agricultural inspector. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into plants that are so controversial, so genuinely dangerous, or so ecologically destructive that the law literally had to draw a hard line against them. Okay, let's just jump right into our botanical rap sheet for This Explainer. We're going to cover nature's hidden poisons, the agricultural saboteurs, banned by bureaucracy, government-endorsed invaders, and finally, the human-plant paradox. Starting with Section 1, Nature's Hidden Poisons, Visceral Threats.
Let's kick things off with the immediate threats, fruits that will bypass a simple stomachache and send you straight to the emergency room. And we're beginning with Jamaica's absolute beloved national fruit, the ackee. Now, the ackee tree is deeply woven into Jamaican culture, but man, it carries a severe risk. When the ackee pod splits open naturally on the tree, revealing that bright yellow flesh inside, it's perfectly safe. It's delicious. But pick it early? Well, then you are ingesting a potent toxin called hypoglycin. This toxin literally blocks your body's ability to metabolize fat for energy. It causes something known as Jamaican vomiting sickness, which can trigger severely low blood sugar and even seizures. Because of this extreme risk, the FDA actually banned fresh ackee imports way back in 1973. Canned versions, which are processed safely after the pods naturally open, are totally legal and available, but the fresh fruit, completely locked out.
That chilling quote brings us right to our next outlaw, which is actually growing right now in Florida, the Manchineel tree. It's widely considered one of the absolute most dangerous trees on Earth. Literally every part of it produces this milky white sap that is packed with a potent irritant called phorbol. Just standing under this tree in the rain will blister your skin. Burning its wood releases smoke that can literally blind you. And eating its sweet-smelling fruit, that causes severe throat swelling. Indigenous Caribbean populations actually use this exact sap to poison their arrows, one of which, by the way, fatally struck the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon in 1513. But here is the crazy part. Despite being incredibly lethal, the Manchineel is a protected species in the Florida Keys because it stabilizes coastal soil. You absolutely cannot legally cut it down without a permit, even if it's on your own property. Now, contrast that with the Trojan horse situation we have here with the starfruit. Unlike the Manchineel, starfruit is entirely legal to grow in most states, and it just sits freely in your local grocery store produce aisle. Its pretty geometric shape makes it look completely innocent, right? But for the roughly 37 million Americans living with chronic kidney disease, a single serving can be a fatal mistake. It contains caramboxin. That's a neurotoxin that healthy kidneys just filter out without a problem. But for patients with compromised kidney function, the toxin actually accumulates, triggering confusion, seizures, and even death. So it occupies this bizarre legal middle ground. It's totally unregulated, yet genuinely dangerous to a massive portion of the population. Moving into Section 2, the agricultural saboteurs, invisible diseases. So, stepping away from direct human toxicity for a moment, we encounter plants that look perfectly innocent but actually harbor microscopic dangers capable of dismantling entire national industries. Enter the black currant. Now, in much of Europe, this is a staple berry. It's famously used in juices and jams, and it actually boasts about 4 times the vitamin C of an orange. But in the United States, it was completely outlawed for decades. Why? Well, because of a microscopic accomplice. Back in the early 1900s, a devastating European fungal disease called white pine blister rust was absolutely tearing through American pine forests. Scientists eventually realized this fungus needed an alternate host to complete its life cycle, and the black currant was that host. The berry bush itself wasn't diseased, but just having it around allowed the fungus to spread and wipe out native pines. So the federal government didn't mess around. In 1911, they began literally tearing out millions of currant plants nationwide. Because of these incredibly strict forestry protections, generations of Americans grew up entirely cut off from the bold, wine-like flavor of the black currant. Just imagine going decades without one of the world's most popular berry flavors. It actually wasn't until 1966 that the federal ban was lifted, and they just left the decision up to the individual states. New York didn't lift its ban until 2003, and even today, states like Massachusetts and parts of the Midwest still strictly regulate planting them just to protect their local timber. Just think about this number for a second. 500 million. That is the estimated number of common barberry plants destroyed by the US government across 18 states starting in 1918. Similar to the whole black currant situation, the common barberry, which was just a popular ornamental shrub, was serving as the alternate host for a completely different fungus called wheat stem rust. And this rust was absolutely wiping out hundreds of millions of bushels of Midwestern wheat. To save the literal breadbasket of America, the government basically had to declare all-out war on a garden shrub. All right, Section 3, banned by bureaucracy, paperwork, and pride. Our next outlaw isn't toxic, and it's not harboring any secret fungus. Instead, it was kept out of the country largely by international trade law, mountains of paperwork, and honestly, a bit of French protectionism. I am talking about the Mirabelle plum of Lorraine, France. This is a tiny, incredibly sweet, marble-sized plum, and the Lorraine region produces roughly 70% of the entire world's crop. Well, in 1996, France secured a protected geographical indication from the EU, meaning only plums grown in that exact specific region can legally carry the name. But then they went a step further. They successfully lobbied to restrict fresh exports to the US under the guise of pest control in their phytosanitary trade agreements. However, if you talk to American orchardists, many view this simply as protectionism dressed up as agricultural policy. It's basically a clever way for France to keep the entire fresh market to itself. Which brings us to Section 4, Government-Endorsed Invaders, the hubris of man. Let's move to the climax of our explainer, and honestly, this is where it turns into pure irony. We are looking at aggressive, invasive species that the US government and botanists intentionally imported, planted by the literal millions, only to watch them completely betray us. Every single one of these 4 plants was brought in with excellent intentions, whether it was for cheap commercial landscaping, stabilizing erosion, or creating resilient crops. But as you'll see, good intentions just don't always translate to good ecology. They went from celebrated solutions to absolute noxious weeds. Let's start with the Bradford pear. Developed in the 1960s, it was this cheap, fast-growing tree that produced these beautiful white blossoms. It became a landscaping staple almost overnight. Subdivisions across the country were just lined with them, and nobody worried about its tiny, hard fruit because, well, it was totally inedible to humans. Well, actually, that was a huge mistake. Birds ate them, without any problem at all, spreading the seeds across fields and forests for miles. The tree spread so aggressively that it formed dense thickets that completely crowd out native plants. Oh, and those pretty white blossoms, if you've ever been near one, you know they have a famously foul odor. It became such a disastrous decision at scale that Ohio officially banned the sale and planting of it in 2023, and Pennsylvania and South Carolina quickly followed suit. Some cities are literally offering buyback programs right now just to get homeowners to cut them down. Next up, we have the trifoliate orange, native to northern China and Korea. This plant exists in a totally bizarre legal gray zone. Because it tolerates cold exceptionally well, it's incredibly valuable to commercial citrus growers as a disease-resistant rootstock. So legally, it's a vital agricultural tool. But outside of those controlled farms, absolute nightmare. It naturalizes aggressively along roadsides in the southeast, creating these incredibly dense thickets with thorns so dangerous that mechanical clearing is nearly impossible. So depending on exactly where it's planted, it's either an invaluable commercial asset or a heavily restricted, downright dangerous weed. Then there's the Russian olive. This is a tree that literally crept in through government pamphlets and good intentions. For decades, the USDA aggressively promoted it across the West and the Great Plains as this brilliant solution for erosion control and windbreaks, but the damage revealed itself in slow motion. The Russian olive spread rapidly along river corridors, places like the Colorado and Rio Grande systems, completely outcompeting native cottonwoods. It traps sediment, it physically alters flood cycles, and it degrades the exact river habitats that migratory birds and fish desperately rely on. Now, states are spending millions of dollars annually in a desperate attempt to remove the exact same tree the government once told everyone to plant. And that brings us to a plant with just absolute audacity, the Himalayan blackberry. It was introduced completely deliberately in the 1880s by the celebrated plant breeder Luther Burbank. He thought it would be the perfect commercial crop. And, he was right about the sweet fruit, but he grossly underestimated its biology. This plant produces canes that can grow 20 feet in a single season. And get this, the tips of the branches grow new roots wherever they touch the soil. It advances on multiple fronts simultaneously, literally swallowing entire lots and smothering native shrubs. It's now officially listed as a noxious weed in Washington, Oregon, and California, and it's proving almost impossible to permanently eradicate. And finally, Section 5, the human-plant paradox. Rule breakers. Despite all the federal fines, the state citations, the eradication efforts, and the millions upon millions of dollars spent, our story actually wraps up with something very familiar: human defiance. Because here is the truth. We are continually finding ways around these restrictions. We forage along roadsides every single August to pick those sweet, highly illegal Himalayan blackberries. We gladly import canned ackee to bypass the FDA's fresh import ban just so we can still enjoy traditional Jamaican dishes. Dedicated orchardists up in the Pacific Northwest are quietly cultivating obscure clones of the French Mirabelle plum, and farmers are out there actively lobbying state legislatures to bring back the black currant. We just can't help ourselves, can we? This defiance really just goes to show how deeply and often complexly we relate to the plants we love, desire, and depend on. So, the garden was clearly never as innocent as it looked, right? We've seen plants that can literally poison a conquistador, fungi that can bankrupt a farmer overnight, and government policies that accidentally created the very invasive thickets they now spend millions trying to destroy. It really is an incredibly fine line between a beautiful backyard and an illegal botanical disaster. So I'm going to leave you with this. Knowing all the risks, the hefty fines, and the potential for total ecological chaos, which forbidden fruit would you risk growing?